Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a short story because it is Short Story Tuesday. And today's short story is all about heaven and love. I am referring to My Dear You by Rachel Khong, which was published in 2017. For those who don't know, Rachel Khong is a Malaysian-American writer who's been getting her work published for about the past 10 years now. She's written a short story collection as well as one novel, with one set to be published in 2024. I would be very interested in checking out her longer form writings, as this short story is very interesting and melancholic in a way that intrigues me. I've been told that I lean towards melancholy type stories, although don't tell my friend Bevan that I told you that, because she will most likely be like, I told you so, and I don't want to hear that. But yeah, very interesting author. They haven't published too much, but what they have published is very interesting, and I'm glad to catalog them here today. So without further ado, let's talk about My Dear You. I'll do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So My Dear You focuses on an unnamed narrator who dies and goes to heaven in a bit of a strange and kind of funny little bit of circumstance. The narrator is actually eaten by a crocodile, being their cause of death. And it turns out that they were on their honeymoon, it seems, after having gotten married. And so they're in heaven because their face got torn off by the alligator. They are given an opportunity to have a new face. And although they consider, switching things up because they were made fun of for their Chinese facial appearance when they were younger, they decide to go with the same thing. They go about living in heaven, and they have a great time. It seems like a bit of a perfect utopia because, of course, it is heaven. They make friends with someone named Heidi, and they play quite a bit of racquetball, sometimes playing for 4 years at a time because you lose track of time in heaven. And although they aren't very good initially, they later become even better than Heidi because it seems practice makes perfect. But as time goes on, while the narrator is in heaven, she finds herself forgetting her family, beginning with her mom and her dad. She just doesn't remember what they look like or what their names are. And she begins forgetting her husband, her fiance, the guy that she married before she just died, Adam. They had a great relationship, but it ended pretty quickly. And although he was the majority of those relationships, she finds herself forgetting a lot of aspects of it. And soon all she can find herself remembering are the reasons that she doubted the relationship in the first place. And it makes her incredibly sad, and she tries to do things in heaven to forget or to stop thinking about all of that. Because if she thinks about it, she's gonna cry. And so time just progresses, and eventually she completely forgets who Adam is. She has to write his name down, but that keeps getting erased, and so she just completely forgets who Adam is, and she doesn't really realize why she's feeling this sort of unhappiness. But pretty soon she meets another person named Adam, although she doesn't realize that this might be the original first Adam. It could be the original Adam, or it could be a new person named Adam who she just falls in love with. I think it's up to the reader to really interpret that and find what they think it could possibly mean. But they have a great relationship. It lasts for 100 years. And they rediscover their love for this person, or they discover a new love for this person. Again, it's up to your interpretation. But after this 100 years, they decide to go separate ways because it's heaven, and there's always room for new love and whatever. And the narrator notes that like they had a great relationship, and that they were deeply in love with this person. And sometimes, as the story comes to a close, they note that they write letters to this person that they loved, beginning with "My dear you," and that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there is quite a bit worth talking about with "My dear you." And one of the ideas that Khong is talking about here is that of religion. The narrator goes to heaven at their death. It seems to be the Christian interpretation of heaven because there's talk of Jesus and whatnot. So already you have like this kind of enmeshed in Christianity, Catholicism, whatever you want to call it. And heaven is perfect bliss as it's always been described. There doesn't seem to be God walking around or anything like that, but maybe that's another question entirely, and that's probably not Khong's focus here. But what's also interesting is how the narrator's husband, person that they love, is named Adam. Almost like Adam and Eve. That feels somewhat significant given the religious undertones of the story. Although the narrator is unnamed, you could interpret it. You could interpret their name to probably be Eve or something like that. What's also interesting is everyone is 33, or they are aged up or downwards to the age of 33, but they keep their emotional and mental maturity or whatnot. Like children who are aged up to 33 develop that maturity. So that's the age that Jesus was. So again, the religious connection there. But it also seems like Rachel is blending Buddhism in with some of this Christianity. A little bit of different cultures going on. Specifically noting, like how the structure of heaven seems intent on getting you to forget your earthly sort of materialism, your earthly desires, and all that's left is the concept of yourself moving forward. Because like every time she writes down the name Adam, it's erased. She has to hold on to it in order to keep that. Otherwise, a janitor will come along and every day after they're cleaning their room, the janitor will remove that kind of thing. So again, getting at Buddhism, and even the narrator's friend Heidi talks about meditation and whatnot. So there's some elements of Buddhism in this story. But a lot of religions talk about soulmates and whatnot. Here, the idea of the soulmate is thrown into question because, yes, the narrator and Adam do find each other in heaven if you interpret it that way. But at the same time, they only last for 100 years before they decide to go their separate ways, indicating that there could be multiple soulmates, or that the concept of the Christian or the Western belief of soulmates is wrong in some capacity. So in this story, you see Rachel Khong, sort of adapting the idea of heaven and Christianity for her own needs, and then blending other religions into it to create something new and different that people might not have touched upon before. So that's a good use of religion in this story. And then related to the idea of soulmates, you have Khong talking about love here. The narrator finds herself like remembering someone that she loved, reflecting on the idea of love. But she also finds herself forgetting someone that she loved deeply, throwing into question whether or not she actually loved that person. She finds that she's only remembering the faults of this person as time goes on, that there's a struggle to understand why they were in love in the first place, what caused them to want to get married and want to be together. There's an interesting quote that I would like to read to you from this. Before getting married, we talked circles around marriage, what it would be, what it meant to people. Was it a thing we were going to do? Sometimes the talks ended in me turning away so my mouth could contort into a ridiculous downturned shape, and I could cry quietly. There was never a warning. The sadness would overcome me all of a sudden, when we would each respond to something simple like, "How was your day?" or "How was work?" I would listen and wait for the truer answer. How he felt and what he was scared of, some insight into what one of his brain regions said to another of his brain regions. It was exhausting, I bet, for him. It was exhausting for me, too. And there you see that she's thinking about some aspects of a relationship that weren't as high quality as they could be, the flaws in their relationship, how they maybe weren't communicating fully with each other, how they maybe didn't necessarily want to get married, but it was the natural next step, and so they felt that they had to. And she later, like Khong later writes that the narrator is, sees the glimmer in Adam's eye, noting how he realizes the full extent of what he's going to do with this marriage, and maybe doesn't necessarily want to do it. Or maybe that's just what the narrator sees. She's projecting into Adam, It's that thing you do like over time where you think about the relationship, but you can only remember why it didn't last or something like that, or why it was doomed to fail. And you can't really remember the good aspects of it, although there were good aspects of it. And that's important because these, at least in one interpretation, the narrator and Adam do find their way back to each other, and they remember why they loved each other in the first place. The strength that each of them has, mixed with the caring about the other person, and genuinely wanting to be there, and noticing when the other person isn't feeling that great, and being a shoulder to cry on. There's a lot there that the narrator is remembering, like, oh, that's why I wanted to be with them. Which, over hundreds of years, you might not necessarily completely understand if you weren't around them. But what's also interesting is how, even though this love is pretty strong, and you could argue that if they're finding their way back to each other, they must be soulmates, this only lasts for 100 years. Wouldn't these people be together for eternity? Or something like that. But I think what Khong is arguing is that many loves are possible in heaven, because if you're going to live for an eternity, why would you spend that eternity with one person when you could find many people to share that life with, to share an afterlife with, and bond and connect with them, and be all the more richer for having known all of these many different people. It's certainly one interpretation of what Khong is trying to say here, but I do like how it kind of turns the whole idea of heaven on its head, because we always think after we die we get to spend it with our loved ones, just them for eternity. But there's so many other people that you could meet if heaven is as people have previously described it in the Christian religion. Anyway, those are my thoughts on My Dear You by Rachel Khong, a pretty solid short story. I am very happy that I sought out Rachel Khong's writing. A little bit melancholic, but melancholic in a way that really makes you feel for what happens at the end of the story when it ends on a bit of a happier note. Very earned ending, I would say, and one that I think Rachel Khong could have probably extended into a longer form book. There's other short stories, or not short stories, but long books that are also about the afterlife and characters sort of discovering new things about themselves and the afterlife, that I think is something that she could have pursued and talked about in a novel or something like that. But this also really works with the short story, so I'm not really complaining about anything here. I definitely recommend it to you, and I will link to it in the comments below, or description below, so that you can find it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let's have a discussion about this short story. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about Rachel or My Dear You, if they don't already know. Otherwise, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and heavenly travels. Farewell.